Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art of photography. Welcome to the Art of Photography. I'm Ted Forbes, and today we're going to start part one of a multi-part series where what I want to do is take you through the entire process of film photography, all the way from loading up the camera and how the camera works to getting a print in your hand at the end. And so if you're interested in film photography and traditional wet process, this will be very beneficial to you, and you'll be able to learn some things, pick some things up as you're going along. I will post all the equipment you need, things like that, in the show notes, which will be on the podcast website. And if you haven't visited that yet, it's just simply go to thepublicbroadcast.com and click on the Art of Photography, and that'll take you in. And anyway, I'll have the show in there, and then I'll have links to resources for film and things like that that you might want to purchase as you go along through this. If you're not a film photographer, if you're pretty much just cool with shooting digital, this will still help you kind of get an overall process of how photography works and traditional photography and wet process printing and developing the negatives. So anyway, the first thing we're going to do is I want to make this really easy, and we're going to work with the Holga again. And I had a Holga episode a while back, and if you haven't seen that, you might want to go back and watch it. But just to reiterate a little bit, Holgas are plastic cameras. They have a single one-element meniscus lens, which we talked about in one of the lens episodes, and they're kind of known for their lo-fi funky quality. It's a plastic camera and a plastic lens. It's one element, and you're going to get some kind of arty lo-fi shots. It only has one shutter speed and one aperture, which is fine because that kind of puts some limits on what you're doing and allows you to concentrate just on taking the picture. But know that it does have limits, and we're going to talk about those in just a second. Right here, this is a heavily modified Holga that I've got, and I got this one from Randy at holgamods.com. And I've got some things like it allows me to hold the shutter open so I can do long exposures at night, things like that. But anyway, Randy sells some great cameras. You can do all this with the stock Holga too, all the stuff we're going to talk about today. I also have, there's another camera here. This is a Woka, which is basically a Holga, except it has a glass lens made by the same people in China, I believe. And basically it's just one shutter speed again, and you have your kind of focus lens here. You have to estimate. You've got the choice of one person, three people, a group of people, and a mountain. So obviously focusing is a little bit of guesswork on here. It does have an aperture button on here that says it's switching between cloudy and sunlight settings, but open your Holga and look inside. It does nothing. I think this was just a design flaw that was kind of accidentally forgotten about or never implemented, something like that. But anyway, the two metal brackets on the side will take the back off, and I'll show you how to load the camera in a second. And beyond that, you just simply have a winder, and this advances to the next frame. And there's no stop on it. What you have to do is you have to read, I've got mine covered with electrician's tape just so light doesn't get in. There's a red window on the back, and on the backing paper of the medium format film, it has the numbers of what frame you're on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 12, etc. Some Holgas do come with a mask that you can put over, and basically what that allows you to do, rather than shoot square pictures, is to shoot rectangular pictures, and you can get 16 per roll instead of 12. That's really not anything I'm ever interested in. I like shooting this for a certain look, and that look is to shoot square 6x6 negatives. So that's what we're going to do for our purposes here. In fact, I can't even tell you where my masks are for these cameras because I never use them and they've gotten lost. A couple other variations on this theme too is this is an old box camera. Gosh, probably from the 30s. This is an Ansco B2 Cadet, and you can find these on eBay really cheap. And if you wanted to pick one of these up, you can get them for around $5. Just know that because of their age and they're made out of cardboard, that sometimes they're a little flimsy. And you want to make sure you get one that works. You also want to make sure that you get one that takes 120 medium format film. Medium format kind of is this umbrella, and it also includes things like 620 and 616, things like that. And they're not the same size, and you can't get those films now. So unless you can find the spools and find a way to modify your film, and if this is your first go at this, I wouldn't do that right off the bat. I think it's more important to shoot some pictures, have some fun, and see what kind of results you get in the end. I think that's way more important than trying to mismatch a film size. But anyway, that is a possibility. This one does take 120. They do exist. This is, again, a B2 Cadet, and they can be found all over the big auction site. So in the last but not least, I want to talk about the Diana camera. And this is actually, it says Windsor on it, but Dianas were made by a plastic company in China in the 60s or so. And it was basically, they were made to give away as corporate gifts. They were just cheap cameras. And long about the late 70s, early 80s, there were some photographers who did some gallery work using these. And they really have cheap lenses, and they have all the distortions that you could possibly find in a single element lens. But that's what makes them so cool. They kind of have a look to them. And a real Diana, they're being remanufactured now by a very overpriced company. And I don't suggest buying those at all. So you might see them at Urban Outfitters or something like that, and they're just ungodly overpriced for what it is. It's just a cheap camera. Plus, to get the look you really want, and pardon me, I'm a snob on this, you want to get the old ones. And they'll run you, depending on what you find on eBay or used, you can get them anywhere from probably around $25 up to $100 if it seems like it's really a collector's item or it's rare. They were called Dianas. They were manufactured under different names. This one happens to be a Windsor. They were all manufactured by the same company, but they came in different varieties, but they're all basically the same camera, and it works just like a Holga. But I think if this is your first time out and for your purposes here, probably the Holga is the way to go. I'm going to load up my Woka, my glass lens Holga, for all of our examples here. And let's go ahead and change the angle here. I'm going to show you how you load film in here. Basically, to remove the back, all you have to do is take these two metal brackets, there's one on each side, and simply slide them towards the bottom of the camera. And then the back should just come right off. Now, the way this kind of works here is, if you've ever shot 35mm film, is that the film generally comes out of a canister, and then when you're done with the roll, you wind it up back into the canister. But 120 film, or medium format, is a little different because the canister will simply roll onto a new canister. So what you want to, canister, the spool. So what you want to do is just take the spool out, and if you just kind of push it towards the top, the bottom will slide out, and you just kind of pull it out like that. And you want to move it over to the other side, and just make sure that the notch in the top matches up with the taking winder here, so that you might have to adjust that just a little bit to get that in right, but you want to make it so indeed it will wind, otherwise it won't go in here actually at all. And so once it's in, what you can do is just kind of wind that a little bit, and you can see that there's kind of a slot in the middle of the taking spool, and that's where we're going to put the paper. Okay, so now we're ready to load the other side, and what I'm going to do simply is 120 film comes usually in a box, and then it comes in an individual wrapper. And I'm simply going to tear the side of the wrapper and remove the plastic part here, or the foil part. And then you're left with your roll of film. Now this is wound tightly, and it seems kind of janky, but it does work. But this does keep light out of the film. You want to kind of be careful because you're going to be taking this on and off, so you want to do this in subdued light at least. Basically it's taped on, and so you can just put a nail or something under that, remove the tape, and I go ahead and remove it completely. And some people might want to wait on this step if you've never done it, because right now I'm going to have to hold it in place while I put it in, so you might put it in first and then remove the tape. But either way, what you're going to do is simply insert. There's not a groove in this slot, so you're just simply going to put it in. And sometimes you have to goof around to get it in here, but just make sure that the paper doesn't roll out or come off, and you're good to go. Okay, now what you do is you can simply see where the taking is. Okay, what I'm going to do is just hold my thumb there to keep this from unraveling as I'm pulling this. So, don't hold too tightly, but just tightly enough so that I can pull this and it doesn't come off. That's all you want to do. It's really pretty easy. And then we're going to go ahead and insert that into that slot in the taking spool there. And simply start winding, and just make sure that the paper backing here is just fitting in between the two ends of the spool. And give it a couple winds around there. One other thing you might consider here is how this winds. You want to make sure that when you are done shooting that it's tightly wound on the taking spool. And Holgas by nature, just everything's kind of loose in here, so sometimes you might have a loose roll on the end. And you're going to get light leaks if you do that, because you take it out and light gets in the sides. One thing you can do to avoid that is just I just took a small piece of cardboard off the end of the box and just folded a couple times. And what I'm going to do is don't want it to be too tight, but I'm going to tighten it just enough and go ahead and stick it under the giving spool there, just so that I get a little bit of resistance, and this does get a little bit tighter wind, which is important, because when you take the back off later, you don't want loose film. Loose film is going to mean light leaks, and which is going to mean no good. Some people like light leaks for an effect, and if that is your bag, then by all means just leave that as loose as you want. Now, Once you get the back on, you slide the two metal locks back into place. These are still very loose, and if you've not shot on a Holga before and don't have much experience, I would go ahead and take some electrician's tape. You don't have to go to town or anything, but I would go ahead and tape those down just so they don't come loose and you don't have that back pop off on you in the middle of your shoot. The other thing that I do is you do have a red window on the back, and I'm going to show you what that's for in just a second. I take a piece of black electrician's tape and I just fold it over so I have a little latch. And basically, I'm not a big fan of light leaks personally, so I don't want it even to leak through the back through that the red window. And it will a little bit. It's obviously reduced because of the tint. The other thing you want to make sure is Holgas come with a mask sometimes, so you can get more shots on the roll, but they're smaller images, or they're actually rectangular. But what you want to do is, I'm not shooting with the mask in this one. I want square images. So you need to make sure that this latch down here, there's an arrow. You need to make sure that it's pointing to the 12. I want to get 12 exposures to a roll, not 16. So once that's pointing to the 12, I have my film loaded. What I need to do is just start moving the winder. And this takes just a minute, but you want to pay attention and watch through the red window, because there's going to be a series of numbers that come up in here, and they tell you what shot you're on. And so, okay, I'm starting to see some graphics coming up on the paperback, and it'll warn me when I'm getting close. And Ilford does a really good job of this, as does Fuji. Kodak, when you see the logo, you're going to get close. So I'm going to keep winding this. I still see the arrows, so I'm good to go. And I'll keep winding. And watch out, because the number 1, as soon as you see the logo, there it is, number 1. It just looks like a little line. I wish they would make that a little more obvious, but you can see that there is in fact a 1 in the window. That is my first shot, and I'm ready to go. So simply I'm just going to pull the tape back over it just to protect it a little bit. Now, once you are ready to start shooting, you're outside, and you're going to just simply turn the focus ring and estimate your focus. And then the next thing you're going to do when you're ready to take the pictures, go ahead and press the release lever. It's right here, and that will make your exposure. You want to get in the habit of, as soon as you've taken your exposure, go ahead and wind to the next picture. So I would remove this tape, or just pull it back, and then take the winder up until I see a 2 in there. And that's really, really important, because otherwise, if you forget to wind it, you're going to get a double exposure. You're going to take 2 shots on the same frame. And, you know, also that's a cool effect. So if you want to try doing some double exposures, the Holga is incredibly easy to do double exposures on. So basically that's it. I'm all wound up, and I'm ready to go shoot some pictures. Okay, so we're all loaded up and ready to go shoot. One thing I forgot to mention before we start loading the film in here is that I am using a real low-speed film. I'm using an ISO of 100 on here, and that is very important because remember, we have a fixed shutter speed. I can't change it, and it rates out, depending on how new your camera is, to around a 60th of a second. The aperture setting, remember, it doesn't exist, and the fixed aperture in here, what I found is people have measured this and figured out to be about f13, which is kind of in the middle. So if you watch the episode on the Sunny 16 rule, what I would do is don't worry about it too much. The more important thing is to have fun with this. But if you're going to be shooting outdoors on normal sunlit day, what I would do is I would use a 100 speed film. This is Kodak Plus X, so it's actually 125, but it's close enough. I wouldn't use 400. And then pay attention to what the lighting is like. If you know it's completely overcast, if you live in the Northeast or something like that, or Northwest where it's cloudy all the time, probably what you want to do is go up to about a 400 speed and have fun from there. I am shooting black and white film because this whole process is going to be black and white in the end. So when you're purchasing film, what I would do is get lower speed, black and white for normal sunny days, and I would go 400 if you're in unusually cloudy weather. Now, pay attention to the scene you're shooting, and one thing you can do is if you feel like you're shooting something really bright, like you have a lot of highlights coming off a building, or maybe you're shooting kind of in the sun's kind of right there, one thing you can do just to tone this down a little bit and keep your highlights from blowing out is to use a filter. Now, this is black and white film, so one option I have is to use a red filter, and I'll just hold it over the lens. These can be purchased in any camera store or online, and they're not that expensive. Now, a red filter, we'll get into this later on another podcast, but this does increase contrast of the image. And if I don't want to mess with the contrast, if I think it's going to be too much, the other option you have is to use a neutral density filter, which we talked about in the filters episode. You could use a circular polarizer too, but you want something that's going to shave the light about a stop. An ND filter, an ND2, actually neutral density, you're likely to take it back 2 stops, but don't worry too much about that. That's something you can get into later once you've shot a couple rolls and you kind of know what you're going for, and you know either it's blowing out or you don't have enough light in the ISO. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and go outside and take some pictures on this. We're going to come back here next time, and I'm going to start showing you how you're going to develop your film. So this has been The Art of Photography. Thanks for watching.